Hey, what's up, guys? This is James with The Subject Supposed to Speak. This is the title of this YouTube channel. As I went into last time, my first video, which I made last night, the purpose, ostensibly, of this channel is basically it's going to be an experiment in trying to employ uh, basically the method of, of psychoanalytic practice using a web camera, YouTube, and the internet, right, uh, as my other supposed to know, as in the place of the person you normally speak to within these uh, these sorts of things. Now, so there was a pause just there. There's a lapsus. There's me hesitating, right? And normally, if I was talking to a real analyst of flesh and blood, that person would encourage me to reflect and associate around that pause, around that lapse. So that's what I'm going to try and do right now. And the idea is that, when there's these disruptions in the normal flow of our speech, this isn't just some kind of purely meaningless phenomenon. It's not just a glitch in the matrix, as it were. It's in fact indicative, rather, of the unconscious mind trying to give voice to itself. Um, it seems like now would be a good time for us to delve into a little theory, though, on that note, right? Because anybody who's watching this who isn't versed in the vernacular is going to wonder, well, what is the unconscious mind, right? Um, and Lacan has a very interesting definition of it. I'm going to try and pull it up here and see if I can find it on the internet here. Uh, let's see. What's it going to do with the concrete discourse, unconscious? Let's see. Um, let's see. It's like, there it is. There it is. Okay, and we can look at this definition, and we can analyze it. We can try and figure out exactly what it means together, and that's the plan right now. So the unconscious is that part of concrete discourse qua trans individual, which is not at the subject's disposal in reestablishing the continuity of his conscious discourse. Wow. So what the hell could that possibly mean, right? That's pretty thorny. That's pretty impressive. Lots of fancy words in that one. Okay, so how are we going to get to the bottom of that? How are we going to make sense of that? Quad trans individual. So the idea here is that every time you speak, there's already a listener implied, right? Speech is not, a sort of autistic. That's probably not the best word. Speech is not a solitary activity. And in truth, there are few human activities that really are, that, if any, that could be considered, purely solitary. Just about everything we do takes the form of a gesture of some sort, and there's always some person who's implied to uh, to be able to comprehend the meaning of our gestures, right? So that part of concrete discourse qua transindividual, which is not at the subject's disposal in re-establishing the continuity of his conscious discourse. Okay, so what about the second part of the definition? So the idea here is that, you know, we speak or we gesture or we do these meaningful things for which a knower or a listener is implied, right? And when there's a situation that arises where someone else can know or infer some kind of meaning from something it is that we're doing or saying, but we, as a subject, I guess this is kind of a poor choice of pronouns, but I, as the subject, am not able to reflect or be aware of that meaning, that significance, um, with reference to my, my own speech, my own gestures, the continuity of my conscious discourse, as it were. Um, that is the unconscious in action, right? Um, so let's just take a very pedestrian example, because this is a lot of really heady stuff, right? So the simple double entendre. Let me give you guys a really good, funny example. So I was working as a bouncer some years back here in Moore Park at the Cafe Firenze. It was a really, really fun venue for as long as it was running. They called it Tangent. And, yeah, I remember seeing a lot of pretty girls. Met a girl who I took out on a date there once too. That's a whole another story that we may get into, because that was pretty psychologically illuminating, I would say, the way all went down. But um, there was this one girl, Lindsay, who was on the staff there, who was really sweet. I'm gonna use her first name. I don't think she's probably even around anymore. And yeah, she probably moved elsewhere. I don't know. I mean, I have no clue really, but I haven't seen her in years, so it shouldn't be an issue. Anyways, um, she immediately took a liking to me. I don't know, whatever it is about me, big, strong guy, have sort of a affable bearing, project a certain image of confidence, and I've learned to in those environments. It's not even, sometimes it's not even something I'm aware of. I'm just kind of like, huh. I'm playing this role now, big strong dude in the blazer. I was working as a bouncer. So anyways, she introduced me to somebody with a smile. And she's like, "This is James, by the way." And what she said after that is just such a perfect example of the unconscious in action. She goes, "He takes care of the ladies after hours." And immediately, I look at her like, huh, okay, and I'm like, yeah, how would you know? And she laughed, right? And she, put her hand to her mouth, and she realized, in that moment, as soon as what she said was spoken, that there were at least two meanings there, right? The first one being, okay, yeah, James is that good guy who will walk you to your car, if you're a girl and you feel like you need to be protected and safe or whatever, right? As an example. The second one, of course, we don't need to get too graphic about, but the point is, something was laid bare there, and perhaps, Lindsay's fantasy of who I was and what I would do, with her or another woman if given the opportunity, was something that was spoken. And this is part of the unconscious, right? Or not part of. This is an example of the unconscious disclosing itself in polyvalent speech, right? Polyvalent meaning many meanings. And it's almost idiotic, to talk about this stuff in these theoretical terms, if not for the fact that the terms are the tools that let us speak about it cogently and fluently, right? Because we all know this kind of stuff goes on. It's pedestrian. There's so many situations wherein these sorts of things arise in life, and without the unconscious, life wouldn't even be any fun. Let's put it that way, right? Without the reality of this thing, we couldn't be entertained by people's sort of inappropriate behaviors that they may or may not be, fully aware of what they're doing as they're doing them, or whether or not it's inappropriate or it's just kind of ciphered and veiled. This is what lends human life and human exchanges their mystery and their intensity and their this is what makes the fact of the unconscious, what makes the drama of human existence something really exciting and mysterious. So anyways, I guess that's kind of my reductio ad absurdum proof of the reality of the unconscious. you know, much to the chagrin of, you know, a lot of people in the current sort of scientific climate, right? Not quite scientific, but you know, a lot of people bring charges against Freudianism and psychoanalysis and the ideas uh, that it purveys on the basis of it not being scientific. And it's like, okay, but like we're not just talking about, you know, empirical observation of uh, you know, objects out there in the three-dimensional world, right? So if that's your view of what science constitutes, right, this sort of physicalist or materialist view, yeah, you know, the unconscious isn't real. But that's a very impoverished view of science, right? Because obviously the unconscious is something that falls under the auspices of you know, the interpretive sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, and you know, we're talking about our humanity. We're talking about a very real aspect of our humanity, um, and you know, when we talk about the unconscious. Uh, so, anyways, that was a long rambling discourse on what the unconscious mind is, and it's probably, you know, at least it has two meanings, you know, that I mean, and just as we can find, you know, double entendres, we can find, you know, triple entendres, we can find multiple valences and multiple meanings, and you know, different sort of unconscious formations in something as simple as a word that's spoken. You know, a singular word can take on so many of these different meanings and disclose so much about somebody's mind when it's spoken in a given context. It's the same thing for even larger and larger units of meaning and significance. So yeah, an entire paragraph, an entire discourse, a dialogue, a monologue like the one I just gave, it can have multiple significances, right? And these are all fruitful to explore in terms of you know, laying bare the contents of one's unconscious, right? So again, going back to all that shit that I just gave you, so we have at least two meanings there, and the first one is James's desire to discourse on the unconscious, right? And I can do this for days. I love it. I love talking about this shit. It's so fascinating to me. Ever since I first started studying psychoanalysis, it's just been on my mind all the time. So that's the first one, the first meaning that I can automatically. The second one is, what am I doing by talking about it, right? You know, this is again, the unconscious has to do also with the performative dimension of speech, right? With our rhetoric, with what we do with our words to obfuscate and to make you know, an apologia, to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves from being found out. Um, and this is just such an everyday occurrence, to the point where most of the time, a lot of the time, it goes unnoticed, right? Um, Even by the person who's perpetrating it. You know, your unconscious can help to protect you and defend you at times, um, by pushing you to do things whose full significance you're not even aware of, and you may be only vaguely aware of, you know, on the level of feeling. So but so that having been said, what was I trying to? What else was I trying to do by discoursing on the nature of the unconscious, and you know, within the context of analysis, these sort of theoretical detours, psychoanalysis that is, they constitute very classically obsessional defenses against the process, against the work of analysis, and that's what I'm doing. And there's no question about it, right? I'm putting on this obsessional show, this performance for you that's really delightful for me, anyways. Really exciting, lots of fun. I get to put my prowess on display like a dancing clown, my intellectual prowess. But what is it doing in terms of, you know, the analytic work that I promised that we would do? It's concealing, right? Um, so, and there it is, right? Something just came to mind. I don't even want to talk about it. or really don't, because all of my friends hate me for talking about it, or they laugh at me for talking about it. Or they're just so out of sorts that I will continue to talk about it. Almost at this point, it's basically been a year after the fact, and maybe 6 months. But this is pretty momentous for me. This has been. And, my heart's getting really heavy just thinking about it. And maybe there's something maudlin and false in my emotions. There almost certainly is. But that doesn't prevent them from being real in some sense as well. And it has to do with a girl. And, that's kind of probably going to be the starting point, is what it looks like for me really starting to disclose a lot of, this stuff that I'm carrying around, that I keep, as one of my friends put it, talking about in circles, right? And it's like the implication is that, well, why? You should be free to do otherwise. And maybe I am, and maybe part of this is just that I've refused to take on, or haven't been able to take on, a really abiding, engaging commitment since the events that transpired. But what were the events that transpired? And I guess it's time for me to talk about them, as much as I'm loath to. And okay, I'm going to take it back even further. Years and years ago, I was 25, I'm 33 now. I'd been speaking to my boss at the firm that I work at. It's an intellectual property firm, and I'd been speaking to him about what he'd encouraged me to do, which was to try and work as a intellectual property practitioner. And what it would take, the easiest road was basically to take a sequence of scientific and technical courses at the college down the street from where I was living at the time, with my parents in Moore Park here. And I said, yeah, why not? What else am I doing with my life right now? I thought to go to law school previously. Somehow I kind of resisted moving in that direction. Maybe it was my student loan debts. Maybe it was the fact that I knew I needed the science coursework anyways, and the science degree anyways. And the thought of the cost of law school, both financially and otherwise, was daunting for me. So I didn't do that. I took a bunch of practice LSATs, but I decided not to do that. And I decided at the age of 25 that I would go back to the community college here in Moore Park, and I would take these courses, in biological science, because that's what I was interested in, and I also knew it would be fairly easy by comparison to something like engineering, right? So I geared up and I started in this direction. You had a biotech class, a chemistry class, and a general bio class. And while I was preparing for all of this, and just, in fairly good spirits, my older brother, who, has lived with us probably for the past 11, 12 years, I don't know exactly what was going through his head, but he got back into this place where he was antagonizing and persecuting me, as I sort of went about my daily business. And I was like, dude, why does this keep having to happen, right? Why is this so stupid, so senseless, so nothing? There's just nothing meaningful or helpful or useful about this. And we'd had a really bad history when I was, say, 16, he had foolishly handed a bunch of money from a settlement for a motorcycle accident he'd been in to my father, and he handed a bunch of that over to him. My father, imagining himself to be some kind of genius crackpot investor, pumped the bulk of these funds into tech stocks in the 90s, and this was during the time of the great tech stock bubble. The market crashed. All that money just sort of, that portfolio just shrunk. And my brother, he demanded that my dad give him what was remaining in the accounts back so it wouldn't shrink further. And my dad begged and pleaded, but finally conceded. And one day, in the midst of all of this, and my brother was doing lots of drugs and stuff like that at the time, and just spending his money foolishly, just being very self-destructive, very predictable sort of behavior for him. Give him an inch, and he'll turn it into a clusterfuck. So what ended up happening is I woke up one day, and I noticed my sister, my older sister, youngest older sister, was crying, walking around the house with an aluminum baseball bat in her hands. And I'm like, what the hell is going on, Lenore? And she's like, look outside. And I go outside, and my older brother, who's like literally twice the size of my father, is just like manhandling him on our front lawn for Westlake Village home in the suburbs. Really, like, this is happening here? Like, I'd never seen anything like this before in my life. I thought this was something that only happens in like ghetto neighborhoods, and this is my family. What the fuck? So, I'm very confused. I'm a very confused 16-year-old boy at this point. I was always a pretty well-behaved kid. I was always kind of the model son. Always spoke in church. Everyone loved me. They kind of trundled me out to be this paragon of virtue, which is very, very harmful in so many ways. But anyways, for however much all that sort of mangled my spirit, I did have a conscience, and I did understand that there were certain things, right, that really, should and should not be happening in life. And so I see my brother just pushing my dad around. My dad never had a father of his own, so he modeled his parenting style after my very histrionic old country Armenian grandmother, who just probably could never say no to her sons. And I get between my dad and my brother, and I'm like, this has to stop. And my brother's like, oh, what do you think, you're this and that? I don't know if he was on drugs or what at the time, and I'm like, what? Yeah, you're 50 pounds heavier than me. I'm not going to let you hurt our father on our front lawn over some bullshit financial dispute that you dug yourself into by being stupid enough to hand the guy such an exorbitant sum of money. Now, so, my brother, he goes, oh, you think you're such a good wrestler, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, actually, I am. I didn't say that, but I just showed him. He barrels into me, and I took an over-under hold, and I hit a nice, clean lateral drop. It was one of my favorite throws. And I'm on top of him. Thank you to my wrestling coaches in high school. I'm on top of him, and all of a sudden he calms down, puts on this act, blah, blah, blah. Let me up, let me up. I'm like, no. Let me up, let me up. No. My younger brother comes over and kind of motions as if to kick him in the head, but it doesn't really happen. And we're just kind of, stuck there. And finally I let him up, and he turns the attack on me. And, the police show up by that time. And then all of a sudden, the guys with the guns come, and he calms down for real. And so he ends up being kicked out of our house against my father's wishes. My father was begging and pleading with the police, don't let this happen, please. And, I'm just like shaking my head like, what the fuck? what the fuck is happening here? This is my family. This is the way things are going. This makes no sense whatsoever. There's nothing reasonable or realistic or sensible about any of this. And I think in some real way, that was the beginning of this deep and abiding sense of mistrust that I tend to have towards all authority. And that doesn't mean, I understand. That doesn't mean that authority is never wrong, because it often is. But it also doesn't mean that authority is never right. And these are things that I sort of consciously understand. But, I still find myself at the age of 33, highly educated, professional licenses, lots of great work experience, in a wide variety of fields and stuff like that. I still find myself questioning authority and questioning the worth of capitulating to, any sort of programmatic, commitment that would promise to liberate me from my circumstances and would promise to give me, a vocation or career. And I mean, I stepped in that direction by certifying eventually to be a patent practitioner. But without a scientific or technical degree, the reality is that my workflow is going to be very limited and not enough to make a decent living on. So I guess let's come back now to the sort of inaugural thing that took me off in this direction, and that was, yeah, I decided I was going to study for the patent registration exam. By that time, my brother had been kicked out and let back in, kicked out and let back in, kicked out and let back in. And at some point, he'd been promised us, the rest of the family, that he would never come back and live with us ever again. And that was after he had been dealing heroin and other hard drugs out of our house. Some hardened criminal broke in, stole his drug money, and he wanted to express the desire to kill the guy. Went out and got a snub-nosed .44 Magnum, and expressed the desire not only to kill the guy but to kill himself. And so at that point in our family history, it had been promised that he would never live with us again. I thought, this is great, finally. And it's like this dark cloud from all this abuse and bullshit I dealt with, throughout my childhood and my teenage years, had been lifted temporarily. It was just so much relief there. And that was about the time when I first went away to school to study at USC. Now, fast forward again to me graduating from USC, and my older brother, even though he's 3,000 miles away, was exerting his influence still on my parents. He had, in fact, found some woman on the island of Tonga and impregnated her. And they were living this wow, that was an interesting slip. I was going to say sham, but shamly life. Okay, so there we go. The unconscious in action. Let me see, sham. Oh. And the name of the person who brought all this to mind came up, and I'm not going to disclose that name. I'm going to conceal it. I'm not going to say it. Yeah, the girl who I met at the college, this, almost a year ago today. Well, I didn't meet her technically. I met her for the second time. Yeah. I think that that's probably a good place for us to stop about a half hour in. And I'll leave you guys a little cliffhanger there, and we'll come back to it next time. We'll see what else we can dig up.